Okay, where are my artist staff? Yay, okay, designers. Cool, engineers. Yay, QA folk. Production folk. Okay, management, other stuff, HR, things I missed. Great, okay. A little bit about me. I do this theme every time. I want to have it be a cascading meme of memes like me. I'm Quinn. I've got different places I've worked in the background. I got educational games is where I started off. I worked at Crazy Maple Studio. Most recently, I was interactive as a narrative designer and writer, and had a lot of different opportunities to work with different studios. And I want to talk today about, well, this talk is primarily about narrative design. This talk is also for anybody who wants to make great stories that we can play. So I don't necessarily just mean, not necessarily books that we read and we envision in our minds, and not stories that we watch on screen and we take in with our eyes and our ears, but actually stories that we can play hands-on and make a physical, emotional connection with the character that we are playing as. So this talk is really about how can we tell stories the way that only video games can. So here's the problem. That sounds great, but here's the problem. When you're working in games, and in my experience as a narrative designer, this doesn't always happen, but oftentimes there is this huge wall that forms between the narrative department and the design department. And specifically, you've got a situation where the narrative team, as they should, cares mostly about story, about characters, emotion, themes, those kind of things. And then design, as they should, cares about gameplay. This is a game. It has to be fun. We have to have engaging mechanics, things like that. So they're kind of opposing interests, but they're both trying to make the same product together. Specifically, I've seen it go like this sometimes, where we have this wall, and sometimes the writer might start things off with a really cool idea for a story, maybe an outline, a full script, and they kind of throw it over the wall to the design department. And the designer takes a look at that story, outline for a quest, the mission, something like that. And maybe it's a really powerful, very emotional story they're trying to tell. It's maybe got witty or sparkling dialogue if it's a first draft in the script. Like, this is great, I love this story. I'm into it. But unfortunately right now, if I were to go take this story and try to build it and put it into a level, it's gonna be mostly walking and talking. There's not a lot of gameplay going on here in this story that you're describing to me. So the design department maybe takes that in and they go, I'm so sorry, but hey, what about gameplay? We need to be thinking about that. And the other party is also sometimes guilty of throwing things over the wall as well. We have our designers sometimes who get a great idea and they throw that over the wall to the writing department. And the writing department learns about this really cool new idea that we are now doing and we are now implementing into the game. Hey, writing team, we have this new mechanic that's going to be really rad, I promise. Or hey, we have approved this really cool innovative system that we're adding to the game. Problem is, it's fundamentally changed the game. It's maybe even changed like the premise or the story doesn't make sense now. It's a new ability that the character can do, and the writing seems like you didn't know that they were going to be able to like float in the air. Like, we have to make that make sense now in our story, right? So a lot of times the writing team is just kind of expected to take that idea and they're kind of like, what about this story we were trying to tell? It's usually on them to just kind of deal with it and rewrite that story and then just make it work. So this frustration grows, right? We have this wall and you have both sides frustrated. They're kind of pointing fingers sometimes at the other department going, hey, don't ask me, that's their problem. Or don't ask me, that's the writing team's problem. So this wall can grow over time. You get frustrations increasing on both in both parties in the studio. What we need to fix this, we need to break this wall down. We need somebody to come in with a hammer and bring this wall down. We need our narrative and our design departments to actually come together. I wonder who could do that. Well, that's why we need narrative designers. So a narrative designer's job, what they do is they really, at least in my experience, sit in the middle of these two departments. They kind of almost speak both languages, right? They can speak story, they can also speak gameplay and game design. And they oftentimes work as a translator, right, between the two parties, right? They can talk to one side, kind of negotiate a little bit, make sure both teams are understanding kind of what the common goal is. There's actually a common language these two teams know how to speak, and it's called gameplay verbs. So thinking about gameplay verbs, these verbs, the things that we do as the character that we're playing as, they're actually there. They're baked into pretty much any idea for a story, for a quest or a mission. Let's think about your classic video game quests, right? Usually starts off, you go talk to an NPC, and they ask you to go find some chickens or something, and you go travel to the quest location. You're gonna maybe investigate the area for clues, right? A lot of games have you do something like that. Wait for fight some enemies, right? So even the story that the writer is telling, if they might not even realize how many verbs, how many gameplay verbs are actually right there baked into their story. And designers are thinking about these gameplay verbs all the time. Our level designers, our combat designers, right? The Witcher, God of War, Arkham, the Arkham game, like most games, I'm willing to bet have some of these verbs, if not all of them, that we're doing when we're assuming the role of this character that we're playing as. So to that end, if the character uses these verbs, Batman, whoever, and me, players, also using those verbs to engage with the game, I'm fighting things, I'm traversing, I'm sneaking, I'm solving puzzles, right? These are our gameplay verbs. Then it makes sense that our two departments should start to use those verbs as a common language, right? Start to think first through these verbs. So that really is the goal of a narrative designer, to basically get everybody speaking the same language, not just speaking story design at each other, but really having common verbs we can use. So great, okay, got that. How do we actually do that? How do we get the story, the narrative team, the design to actually be working in unison together? We need some way that we can get these story beats, the emotional stuff, the ebbs and flows, and the gameplay beats, the fun, the puzzle solving, all those kinds of things, to really be able to be talked about in unison at the same time when we're designing and making a playable experience. So there actually is a technique that I learned when I was doing code development at Lost Boys, a lot of different studios. This is a technique that I learned from one of those studios. And I've actually since seen other studios that do something very similar at their place, and they're called PEX Cards. These are really cool. This is really what I want to share with you today, is this technique. So let's break this thing down. Start off with some sort of square, some sort of box. And at first, what we do is we put whatever beat we're on in a story, right? What's on story beats. First this happens, then this happens, then this happens. Great. We identify which beat of the story we're talking about. The next thing we want to identify is what gameplay verb is happening during that story beat. Next, we figure out, okay, where are we doing this? Where is this taking place? So the level designers can go, all right, this is going to be in the mountain pass, or this is down in the dungeons, or whatever. This is a really important one. Right off the bat, can we identify as a team what's the emotion that the character is feeling, the one we're playing as? And ideally, it's the same emotion that we're eliciting out of the player. We want those two things to be the same. So what's the shared emotion that's happening during this beat? And then the content, right? What actually happens during this beat? So going back to our little basic standard quest I gave you from before, first thing was player goes and talks to an NPC. Great, okay. That's a talk verb. We've identified that. What we can do is change the card. We can give it a color code. We can put an icon on there. Make this a really easy, identifiable. Oh, yellow means this is a conversation beat or a talking beat that happens during the level. And I have the classic, yeah, can you help me find my missing chickens, right? Whatever happens there, and we move on. So here's where the cool part comes in. We take that story outline. We take it's even a first draft that the writer has written, and we go line by line, and we break down each beat. We try to do our best to read it and extrapolate and decode it into these cards so that we're figuring out each beat of the story, and we lay them out like this in this kind of visual way. So at a glance, does anybody see something about this example that might potentially be a problem? Yeah?
There's a whole lot of talking.
There's a whole lot of talking. Good. Yeah, just right off the bat. Uh-oh, too much yellow. There's some blue in there. Great. But basically, yeah, somebody goes, hey, where's the gameplay? If I went and built your story, there's going to be a lot of walking and talking from what I can see right now. So how do we inject some gameplay and make this more of a playable story, not just one that you're kind of told or schemed at? So here's where the really cool part comes in. The narrative designer, often the way at least I've done in the past, is you try to get all parties, on the same call in the same room, and talk about each beat of the stories is before the expensive part has happened, before we go off and actually gray box the level, especially before we go start putting art in the level. We're just on paper still, and we're trying to diagnose this story, find the heart of it, and see how we can make it more playable. So, okay, yeah, first problem. we have a lot of dialogue at the start, right? You know what we can do? Why don't we actually get the player moving? We can make this a traversal beat. We have climbing, we have walking squeeze throughs, right? Seen games that do a lot of this. We can kind of do both at the same time. Cool. But we got another traversal beat coming up right after that. That's not very fun. So the writer might still be able to advocate, hey, this beat, it's really important that the tension is high. We need to feel a lot of tension during this beat. And maybe a designer comes back and goes, you know, we can have some tension. Let's put a little bit of combat in there, right? That's a fun way to kind of make us feel some high stakes. Then we're like, okay, what's happening next in the story? We come across some beautiful vista, right? We see some amazing shot of some mountain or something like that. So instead of just kind of having this big visual reveal that we walk upon, why don't we add like a puzzle that we solve, and then after we solve the puzzle, the doors open and we're rewarded with that vista, right? We feel like we've kind of earned it. Or even you're like solving the puzzle, what's going to be behind this door? And it builds our tension up. We're rewarded even more with that visual reveal. So by the end, we've kind of got a nice colorful rainbow of gameplay, which is kind of what we're looking for. So it's almost a diagnostic tool. You can take a look at whatever story you're trying to tell and at a glance go, is this going to be an engaging, playable story, or do we need to find ways to add some more gameplay into it? So it gets even cooler as your studio is maybe deciding, hey, you know what, we want to do more and more kind of walking and talking type of traversalities. You can play with this. You can make it work for your studio. We can combine two cards into one, and when you see this color, we know as a studio that's what's happening during this moment in the story. Okay, cool. So you might be thinking, that's kind of cool, that's fun, but like, how do I make these little cards? Where could I actually do this? There's several different places. Websites like Figma, Miro, Draw.io. These are all kind of collaborative online whiteboards. I promise I'm not getting sponsored by Miro, but I'm a little bit partial to Miro. I'd used Miro before. Just if you've never heard of Miro, here's a quick little GIF that shows you. It's, again, an infinite collaborative whiteboard. Everybody can kind of get on the same board and start adding stickers and icons and notes. It's just a really cool place to be able to do something visual like this and break down the concept. So on something like Miro, you could put all of your beat cards in sequential flow if it's a linear level, right? Anybody could fly into that Miro. They can hop on, open the tab, and suddenly it's happened. It's a little nerve-wracking if you're working in Miro and you're suddenly like the CEO of the company, right? Like their little name and icon is flying around and checking out your work, but it's kind of cool. They can at a glance get a sense of the story and see and go, I see a colorful rainbow. This is good. I'm seeing a lot of gameplay. This is going to be a fun level. I can't wait till you guys go off and build it. If you have more of a branching type narrative, you get creative with your arrows and nodes, and you can use the space to your advantage and just kind of show where branching choices on the tab. You can see right here, I made this up, but yeah, we have a talking beat, but depending on the choice we make, we're either going into combat or we're going to get to sneak. If you stealth, you'll go cast this moment of tension. Also, what gets even cooler is the other departments beyond narrative and beyond design can start to get involved too. I've had it on teams where the art director and artists are also flying into this Miro board, and they are adding concept art as it comes in for a certain beat. So again, when the CEO comes in or whoever flies through, they're almost like a comic book. They're able to read through this level and get a glimpse and vision in their head what this space is going to look like. And then, where are my engineers again? Yeah, NQA folk, you could drop comments on Miro and flag like, you guys think that this cool beat here is going to be really easy to build, but remember we haven't even made this system yet, or we don't even have. You can highlight problems before you go off and try to build them and find out that they're going to be a problem. So it's a really collaborative tool. Okay, so coming up to the final chunk here of why. Why should we add maybe this process into our game making? Because if we're not careful, there is this kind of dichotomy that can form in a game where if we have this wall that shows up during development, it can show itself in the end product, that there was kind of a wall between the story and gameplay team. Please, you loved Uncharted. I am not trying to dump on Uncharted, but I think there was an era in the mid 2000s or so where we kind of were basically playable movies, right? We had a lot of really amazing high fidelity cutscenes if we were figuring that out as an industry. And then we go like, okay, put your controller down for 2 minutes and we're going to kind of spoon feed you the story. The player starts to internalize, I stop playing. This is the part where I don't play. I just kind of watch what happens to my character, but not so much happen to me. And then I pick the controller up again when it's the fun part, when I get to play. And so there's subconsciously, we kind of get this divide between gameplay and story, right? The wall is there. The wall is present in the final product. And I think players are starting to expect more nowadays, right? We're seeing more and more games kind of have this magic trick they do where it seamlessly blends between cutscenes back in the gameplay and even expressing the themes and the emotions of the story through other stuff that's not a cutscene, right? You can actually, we're finding there's really cool ways you can use the mechanics of the game, kind of what I talked about last year, to evoke the emotions your the characters feel like, have you feel them too. So we need to kind of bring these together, right? And we're getting better at it. And it's, there's been 2 of these, but I'm going to stick to one that I think a really strong example of this from God of War 2018, where, okay, hands up, let's play this game. Great, okay. So for those of you who haven't, you are the God of War, you are Kratos, and it's a father-son journey, right? So you have your son Atreus, and in this clip that I'm going to show you, Atreus' mother has been killed, and in this moment, they've found the person who was involved in that or who's responsible for killing her. And so Atreus has actually just killed that guy, right? Out of this new spark of aggression that we've seen growing in him, but is really manifested in him kind of disobeying Kratos and killing this person, right? And from that moment on, we see a really rebellious kind of teenage phase emerge from Atreus. So that is solidified in the cutscene. But I just love how when we're back on the sticks and we're playing, they found some clever ways to get you to feel like a frustrated parent, just like Kratos feels. So we're gonna watch like a 2-3 minute clip. But while we watch, just keep in mind, I forgot one of my notes. So Kratos, and we have the verbs. Keep in mind, see how many verbs you can spot. Think of those colorful cards, those icons, because you can almost reverse engineer, right? We can watch an existing clip and apply this method to it in hindsight. So let's take a look. I hope it's going to be loud enough.
You killed against my wishes. You lost control.
Haven't you been teaching me to kill?
I have been teaching you to survive. We are gods, boy. That makes us a target. From now until the end of days, you are marked. So I teach you to kill, yes, but in defense of yourself. Never as an indulgence.
Nobody cared about him anyways. What's the difference?
There are consequences to killing a god!
What? How do you know? How do you know?
Watch your tone, boy.
Whatever.
Keep your wits about you, boy. If Modi found us, Baldur cannot be far.
Good. I have a few words for him too.
No, you do not. You will leave him to me.
So you can kill him. Because that's what we do to our enemies, right? Because he'd do the same to us.
I will do only what is necessary.
And I'll help.
No.
Let's take him!
Not yet.
He just never learned. Oh yeah, this room. But we need a new way out.
You've forgotten your training.
Oh, are you talking to me? Thought you didn't like my talent.
Okay, so let's break this down. Start off the classic cutscene, right? This is a very important emotional moment in this story. It is one of those moments where the cutscene was used very, very wisely of like, hey, we need you to pause on playing because we need to show you this. We need you to pay attention. This is really important. But they did that nice little smooth transition back into gameplay, and we're back in, and we're traversing. And normally you have an icon for this, but there's one of these special barriers that only your son, only your Atreus can open for you. You need to have him shoot his arrow. You've been doing this thousands of times up to this point in the game. But they added a new BO line that he kind of shrugged it off and went, whatever, right? He starts to kind of complain about you commanding him on what to do, right? I might be making this up, but I'm pretty sure I remember like he might even ignore the button. Like they got that sneaky. They're like, you know what we could do? Right? We could actually have it jam it so you go, you know, listen to me. Combat, got bored. But another traversal beat, but there's some pretty important dialogue that happens during it, but it keeps us moving, right? He's jumping on our back once again, right? Kind of at the teams on us, you know, it's still that visual relationship is still there, but the dialogue is he's right there in our ear, kind of talking smack. This combat beat, they do something kind of spicy. If you saw, he has this new scripted behavior in his AI where he charges out in front of us, disobeying our orders, not playing the game we've been playing it, right? He's aggressive, he's emotional at this point. He's, you know, fueling it in the combat. So they use the combat to help express how Atreus is feeling right now. And we start to feel, whoa, he's off the leash. This is weird. He's normally been right behind me, but he's now like out of my control. This is kind of scary. And then I cut it out, but it ends with a puzzle beat. And there's been lots of puzzle beats in this game. If you're like me, I sometimes get like awkwardly stuck as Kratos, just like, you know, figuring out the puzzle. And Atreus like gives me a line to help. But at this point, if I remember correctly, it's kind of like, you having trouble? Like, you know, I know what you're supposed to do, but right over there, Dad, like, you know, there's this snark that starts to come in dialogue, but they use the puzzle and the awkwardness and frustration of figuring a puzzle out, and they don't miss that opportunity to express the senior dynamic in that part of the gameplay too. So I'm willing to bet if you play this, or even if you just watch this clip, both Kratos and the player are both feeling a shared emotion right now of, listen here, boy, right? Like, I was like, you little, oh, you're gonna, yeah, you're gonna pay attention to me. If this was a movie, if we were watching God of War, the movie on screen, we would feel for Kratos. We would feel for him, right? We're not in there. We're not in a room, but we can watch just like in a horror movie. You're like, get out of the room, right? We feel for the character on screen. The really cool thing about games, if we take advantage of this kind of telling stories through gameplay, is we get to feel like Kratos, right? We get to, right in lockstep with him. These emotions are elicited out of us. So again, this talk is about doing that. It's about telling stories the way only video games can. Not stories that we sit back and passively watch, but stories that we actively play out, and stories that we can actively feel by taking advantage of not just an amazing script and a cutscene, and avoiding this wall from coming down between these two departments, but instead, we want to avoid this, where narrative only cares about story or design, only cares about gameplay. What we need to have happen here is get narrative to start caring a little more about gameplay, remembering that gameplay can be a tool through which a story can be told, and get designers to remember they're the ones who are hooking your dialogue up if you're a writer, by the way. They're the ones that have to implement. You hand your baby off to them, and they have to go make it happen. But it's on designers to start to learn a bit more about the 101s of story, about emotions, about character arcs, tension, pacing, all these kind of things. Those are important. It's on them to implement it, right? So both parties kind of need to start to learn the other person's crap a bit. And when that wall happens, we need someone to come in and brad easy, come ahead of dams. We need narrative design to come together, right? To use a process that helps them do that, so we can make these amazing, like, playable, interactive experiences. And who better to help out than your friendly neighborhood narrative designers? So, cool. Thanks so much, gang. Only 7 minutes for gosh. Never happened. Azur's not coming in right on 3.
Do you have a technical problem? I can help delay.
Oh yeah. Also, seeing your anybody have any questions or anything? I guess we may as well take advantage of the time. Yeah, right.
You mentioned that this was kind of like a part 2, but people that weren't here last year, is there any way we can see the like first part?
Indeed, there is. If you go to my website, it's just quinelmer.com. I've got it embedded there on the front page. Yes, you can watch that. Hey, yeah.
Okay. Um, so a lot of this comes down to, or like with the cards that you presented, it's very easy to see how that would be applied to something that's very narrative driven.
Yeah.
But then when we take something like RPGs or say Skyrim, most people know Skyrim. When you go to the mage school, it's very clear there is a story. You can apply those cards really easily, even like you said in hindsight. But then when you're in between, like the following your Dragonborn quest or your mage school or whatever you decide to do, how can you decide that when basically the player can go in any direction, do whatever, and like if you're not in an active quest, like how do you tell stories in that sort of empty space between quests?
That's a great question. So the question for the microphone was, could you apply this process that I just walked through to something that's more open-ended, something that's kind of an open world where there's not always a clear-cut story we're walking through. Does that sound right? Okay. So I would actually say, I deleted the slide, but the new tool, the toolkit I'm proposing is this hammer, right? Being the hammer, if you're an narrative designer breaking down these walls, and then this process. But in my talk from last year, there's all those other tools in the toolkit too, right? So every quest line in Skyrim, I think, from what I remember, still had that, it's wrapped around the theme of the Mages Guild or magic, right? So if I was doing this process, these beat cards for that, remembering I would probably make a card for like puzzles, so lots of puzzles, but maybe some special icon of like, this is a magic puzzle, right? We're using magic to solve that. For the in-between stuff, I almost don't know if this would be the right place to use the kind of in-between stuff. I think it's maybe more telling those small stories that are better told just through environmental storytelling, right? And Bethesda's great at that, right? They have those they place those skeletons in that room in Fallout and you're like, oh man, something happened here, right? So there's a whole other suite of tools you can use. And then it's in moments where you feel like this one's needed that you maybe need to guide your team towards using like a beat card process. Yeah. In front.
I guess my main thing is you're doing open world. What you may want to do is in combining those beat cards, you have a encapsulated beat card, and then you see different parts of where the player can go. Because ultimately, while it is open world, there is still the limit of whatever you put into that world, so you can get directions and go from there.
Yeah, that's great. And you can make these cards your own. So if you have your own little suite of, we're proposing a problem, like in Tears of the Kingdom, we're showing you a problem, you can solve it through 15 different ways or more. We're keeping that open-ended maybe for that moment. So was there another hand I saw in the back? Yeah, hey, how's it going?
Yeah, kind of going off of that, like, maybe you kind of already answered this about sort of making them your own, but like being able to add those more kind of environmental storytelling, like, is that something you've seen happen before in terms of artists coming in and being like, oh, this part of the story may not be telling directly, but here are the assets that we're going to use to show it.
Yes, that's great. So on something like Miro, what you can also do, you've got your core story maybe using these colorful cards, right, these beat cards, but you can have a whole other layer underneath it where we're like, that's the story of this mission, but we also want to tell the story of the space. Right, the history of the space we're in, and you could mark that out beneath that, right? You can add to this, or you've got that infinite whiteboard, you can create new layers for it. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Was that that was a stretch? That was a pen signal.
No, that was. You just looked at me, so I was like, okay, you directed my focus. Beyond Ragnarok, are there any more? No, that's not the right term, but like, what are other examples that you want people to go study using this method?
Good question. I think where we're seeing it mostly be applied is in similar types of games like this, where it is it's close to it's got that movie kind of feel to it. It has that bringing your well to the story. So The Last of Us, right? Whether Ghost of Tsushima is a great one, right? Sorry? Death Stranding. Yeah, actually, let's open this up for the last 30 seconds. Any other games that you think, oh, you know what? They either did a process like this or, they could have. Kind of thing. Any other games that come to mind? Shout them out. Baldur's Gate. Yeah, absolutely. There's so many different birds in that game. Breath of the Wild. Yep. So, oh, yeah, absolutely.
Space Marine 2.
Space Marine 2.
Yeah, Stars and Planet.
Sorry. Did you really?
I have another question.
Sure.
In my first 100 level game design course in college, one of the first things you learned is that games are not stories. And now is to lead more to discussion with gameplay mechanics and stuff. As a narrative designer, though, what would be your response to that statement?
Games are not stories. That's interesting. I would disagree. I think that games are, till we think of the next medium, kind of the newest medium in which we're realizing we can tell stories. And again, the way that only they can offer, right? This kind of hands-on. There's ways beyond just words and cinematic work that we can get you to feel something, right? And get to do it hands-on. So, yeah, you just got to look for those opportunities. So, cool. I don't want to run over. Thanks so much, gang.